Hi guys, my name is Kelsey Fish and I'm a junior here at Oklahoma State University. So for this presentation, I wasn't really sure at first who I was going to interview, but then I immediately thought of my friend Darren. She's lived in multiple different places while she was growing up, so I thought she would be perfect for this presentation. So, go ahead and get started. So, who did I interview? Her name is Darren Rodriguez. I know her because we were both in the same sorority here on campus, Alpha Chi Omega. So I met her about a year ago, and I just thought she'd be perfect for it. So she was born here in the United States, in Texas, and then moved to a few different states, and then back to Texas, and then she moved to Japan when she was 6. So even though she was born here in the U.S., she credits her growing up in childhood to being in Japan. So when she was 6, she moved to the Naval Air Facility at Tsugi in Japan, and she lived there for about 4 years, and then her and her family moved to the naval base at Yokosuka, and she lived there for about 3 years. So her dad was a lieutenant commander and supply officer at the first base, so that's why she lived there. And one of the environmental events that happened, this was after Darren lived there, but it really affected the area that she did live in. There was a major earthquake, and that also brought on a tsunami. I know a lot of you probably know about this event. It absolutely devastated Japan. The death toll was about 18,000, almost 19,000 people. So if children lost their parents or caregivers, that would have really affected their development and their play as a child. So thankfully Darren did not live there when this happened, but she knows a lot of people that were really affected by it. So this is Darren. Not me do that. This is Darren, and she sent me this picture from Yokosuka. I don't have a lot of pictures from the first base because she was pretty young when she lived there, but thankfully she was able to send me this one. The population in the city around the base is about 400,000 people, so it's a pretty good size city, and it's very a downtown kind of feel. A lot of high rises and stuff like that here. So move on. This is a picture of the Atsugi Naval Air Facility. They don't really allow pictures of inside the base and stuff like that because it's kind of confidential stuff. So I don't have any pictures of inside, but I imagine, there's neighborhoods and there's schools and stuff in there, so it's not as city-like as the city outside the base. And then this is kind of an overview of what it looks like outside the base. I know it's kind of hard to tell, but a lot of buildings and very close together housing and stuff like that. The city around there is about 84,000 people. Moving on. So, context of play. So the cultural norms in Japan, the children are pretty independent. Darren said it was very normal to see kids as young as 8 to 10 out in the city by themselves, riding the trains by themselves. I know that's not something that you would see here, like an 8-year-old just walking around Stillwater. You wouldn't really see that happening. But there it's very common. So I think it kind of goes back to, and I'll mention this later as well, that Japan was a very agrarian society in the past. So the parents would go out and work in the fields, and the kids would be kind of left at home alone to play and develop together. So I think that kind of transcends into now, where the kids are still kind of left on their own while their parents go to work. So she said that a lot of times they would go to parks inside the base or outside the base, go to arcades. It was very popular to go to arcades for entertainment. So she said they usually wouldn't have a lot of parental supervision at the base and outside in the city. Another thing is she said that the Japanese culture is very cooperative and harmonious together. They really value relationships and being a good member of society. So they really the parents didn't have any worries about their kids being in any danger out on their own. So the value of play. Back then, whenever Darren did live there, and now play is very valued, is highly regarded. The teachers have mandated guidelines that they have to follow in their programs. So they require play-oriented programs in centers in the classrooms and schools because they really do value that development that kids get on their own through natural play. And they're not as structured as American programs would be. So whenever Darren did live on the base, her teachers were mainly American, but there were other students in her classes that were also Japanese. So they still had the Japanese value as well as American value. So it may have been a little bit more structured in her classrooms, but she still told me about how they really did value play. And her parents and caregivers also value play, and Japanese parents do as well. They tell parents to be a little bit more, like they back off a little bit from their kids' play and let it be a little bit more natural. They don't give like direct guidance to children. They want them to initiate the play so that they can develop like physically and mentally and develop those social skills and like relationships. So parents really try to give the kids a little bit more free time, but not too much freedom, but just enough. Don't know what that is. So the physical, environmental, and geographic context of the community. So like I said, Darren did live on the base. So she didn't necessarily live in the city at the first base, but whenever she moved to the second base, she lived off base. So she lived in like a neighborhood outside. So I would say that her physical and environmental and geographic context really did not hinder her play, but it was really good for her play. They would explore outside, go to parks, like they really just, use their surroundings to have fun. So it was very safe there, except for there was a murder at the second base, so during that time she really had to be supervised by her parents, which is not normal. Experience as a child, I would say that playing their community represented that they have a really fun and safe childhood, that they're not oppressed or maltreated, they aren't forced to work, that kind of thing. I would say, like I said earlier, the parents really do just facilitate their play, and the teachers would just like model behavior for that kind of play. And the Japanese view of children is very, based on religion and their morality. So Darren, as a child, she would play on the base, but at the second base she stayed more inside and indoors in her home since she didn't live on the base. They would play outside, they'd go to parks, there's a forest, like bamboo forest around their house, they would go explore that. She and her friends would play house and school, which is something I did as well as a kid. They'd play with her Barbies and pretend they were students. Her mom was a secretary at her elementary school, so she allowed her to take home a toy from the lost and found every once in a while, so I would say that her toys are more manufactured toys. She also had an Xbox and TV in her room, which I was not allowed to have, but she played on that every once in a while. Tamagotchis were very, very popular in Japan at that time, and also I remember I had Tamagotchis too, and some of you probably did as well. So she would kind of use that as a communication between her and the Japanese children, because she really didn't speak Japanese. So I thought that was pretty cool. And she did a lot of playing at school and after school. In the evenings, her parents would let her go out and be out till it was dark and come back and have dinner. And like during recess, they would play tag, freeze tag, that kind of stuff. When she moved to the second base, like I said, she stayed inside a little bit more since her friends weren't, right down the street from her. So that was a little bit different when she got older. They didn't necessarily play house or school anymore. They would just kind of like hang out and talk, or they would go to the arcades. Apparently that was for a lot of entertainment. She told me about this game called Love and Berry. She was kind of embarrassed by it because it's such like a little kid game, but it was an arcade game that her and her friends would play, and they could like dress up the characters and then get cards, like trading cards to trade between each other. So this is a Tamagotchi. It fits in your hand, it's really small, and this is the Love and Berry game. It's kind of just dress up and dance. It was kind of an anime kind of thing. So similarities, I would play outside a lot, I would play house, I would play school with my friends. I play with Barbies too. We'd play tag, freeze tag, that kind of thing at recess. And I would say our teachers really did value play as well, but I don't think we had as much free time as they did, and it wasn't as like structured. So as a difference, I have that we didn't have as we had more structured playtime than they did. I was not allowed to go out on my own in the neighborhood because my parents were a little bit more strict, and is not as trusting of everyone here. So that was a big difference, and she was allowed to be on her own a lot. And I have a twin brother, so for the first few years of life, I had him to play with a lot until once I got more friends, I played with them as well. So her comparison to play, in the book, The International Perspectives on Child's Play, says that parents and teachers should support early childhood play with friends because that will help them develop empathy. And also help the child to develop their cognition, creativity, artistry, relationships, language, physicality, all that kind of stuff. So that was from the book. So I believe that Darren's parents did just that. They let her have plenty of time to go play and interact with others, and the letting her play house and school, I think that really helped with her creativity as a child, and to just play with other kids and not be so all to herself, and to grow those relationships with her friends. So in the future, I am planning to be a speech and language pathologist, and treating children. So I think that this interview experience really helped me to learn about Japan and maybe one day want to visit there. It really wasn't something that I considered before, and now I kind of do because Darren loves Japan so much, so I thought it would be really cool to maybe go there someday. So in the future, I could have a Japanese client, or people that have lived in that culture that really value that play. So I think that could help me to incorporate play into my therapy for those specific children, and to give them successful speech and language one day. And there's a reference from the textbook, and thank you for watching.